Okay, I'm preparing the prime rib today. Beautiful prime rib, as you can see. First step, once you take it out the wrapper, is to trim what they call an aging. Aging is this outside layer of fat. It's really kind of dirty and grisly, so you want to slice it off with a very thin knife. A nice, sharp knife. As a matter of fact, this might not be that sharp, so I'm going to sharpen it right now. And as you see, just a couple of strokes through it. And that should be enough right there. Now I'm going to rinse this blade to get the metal shavings off. That's a nice sharp blade now. Beautiful. Alright, now to trim the aging, I'm just going to go across and make a thin cut on this fat. Very thin. Very, very thin. And I angle the knife upwards so I don't slice too far down into the meat. Because we want to reserve this fat. The fat gives it the flavor. So we want to just really basically clean it up. We want to get this layer of exposed, dirty kind of fat off of the beef. And this one is already pretty well trimmed, so I really hate to do this because I am removing almost all of the fat, but you know what? That's alright. It's still going to be delicious. Never try to work with a dull knife. And never work with a serrated knife. Serrated knives are good for cutting bread. That's about it. When you're into slicing meat, you want a nice smooth blade that's extremely sharp. Alright, almost done here. My special seasoning mixture. It's a mixture of garlic, paprika, onion powder, brown sugar, salt, pepper. What else is in there? Some Italian seasoning and thyme. And that's about it. And now we're going to rub this baby down. We're just going to take the spoon and dump a heap over it and massage it in there with our hand. Now, on the fat side, what you're going to see is the seasoning will stick because you can press it into the fat. But when you get to the not fat side, because we're going to flip this over, you might want to just prepare with a little bit of olive oil. That's what I tend to do. This olive oil here, just a little tiny drop. That's it. Now, put that over to the side and rub it on there. And then just repeat the same process that we did on the other side. Take a spoon, dump it on, rub it around, rub it in. And now the olive oil gives it some sticking power. So our seasoning will stick to it. And remember now, this seasoning is going on the outside. So when you take a bite into this prime rib, you're only going to get a little bit of this flavor. So don't be afraid that you're over seasoning the outside of the roast, because it's only on the very outer layer. So you're not going to have a salty roast because you put too much seasoning on it. Now see how nicely that all adhered to it? Okay? And even the sides? Good. Okay. Now that's a well-seasoned prime rib roast right there. Now we're ready for the next stage. Okay, so the next stage will be the vacuum sealing of the roast. Okay, seal lights out, we're good. Now, this step's important so that I don't get all of the meat rub off, interfering with the sealing, the next seal of this bag. I fold it over like this. So I have a cuff here because this top edge is what's going to get sealed. So I make sure I don't contaminate that top edge because we don't want it to leak once it's in the sous vide oven. I take my roast and I place it in a sealing bag. Very carefully and make sure I don't contaminate that top edge. And as you can see, it's in there with no residue on the top edge. Now at this point, what I want to do is wipe my hands and get all the crumbs from that seasoning off of them, because once I touch that seam, I don't want to contaminate that seam. That seam must be pristine. All it takes is one little grain of salt or seasoning in there and it won't seal in that one spot, which means you'll get a leak. And you don't want water leaking into your bag during the sous vide cooking process. So now that my hands are perfectly clean, and I could have used gloves to do this whole process and just remove the gloves, and that would ensure that my hands were perfectly clean. But I didn't do that today. But now that they're perfectly clean, I'll put Now what I'm about to do is also another double seal. Once the vacuum is in there, I seal it down because we don't want any leaks. No leaks. Okay. Now, what I have is a nice vacuum sealed ribeye, seasoned, ready to go into the sous vide immersion circulator oven. And I highly recommend while you're doing this, a nice glass of Cabernet or Merlot, whatever's going to go with your meal later. It doesn't help the cooking, but it sure will make you feel a little better while you're doing it. So here is my sous vide. What I'm going to do here is set the temperature so it gets to 134. Where am I now? 130. Oh, that looks like 134, right? Okay, so now that we're at 134, I place it in the circulator, in the water bath, and I'm going to turn it on. Okay, so at this point, I can take my roast, I can place it in the bath. Okay, so now my water is going to circulate, and it's going to bring this roast up to 134 and keep it there for as long as I want it there. I'm going to cook this, because it's a prime rib, about 9 hours. Putting the lid on to help hold the heat in. And after about 9 hours, this thing is going to be perfect. 134 degrees throughout, perfectly medium rare. All that'll be left to do is to sear the outside and get that nice little crust on it, and we'll be good to go with a delicious prime rib roast. Okay, now as you can see, I've got the prime rib roast out of the sous vide oven. I'm about to open it up. It's cooked now for 9 hours at 134 degrees, which should be a perfect medium rare. Now what you'll see is I have this jar handy. That is because this juice, this au jus that has come from cooking this prime rib is liquid gold. It is so delicious. You do not want to waste it. It is condensed beef stock. And it's going to be used later to make a sauce or a gravy. Okay, now I'm going to remove the roast from the bag. And be careful not to get any of the juice out of there. And it's still a bunch in here, so we're going to get it out. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Yummy. Delicious. It's got all of those flavors. All the seasonings from the rub mixed with the beef stock. And this is just going to go in the refrigerator for later. Now, I know what you're thinking. The sous vide's probably ready to slice right now, but it's not. What I've done is I've turned my oven on to 500 degrees. I'm going to transfer from this flat baking dish to a rack in the oven and just place something underneath it so any juices that cook off any fat that drips will drip into it. I'm going to put it in there at 500 for about 10-15 minutes, just so the outside layer and the fat gets a nice brown color and coating to it. Okay, and that's what we're going to do now. Okay, now my sous vide prime rib roast is out of the oven. It was in the oven for about 10-15 minutes at 500 degrees to get it nice and browned. I let it rest here about 5-6 minutes, and that wasn't even necessary because with sous vide you really don't have to let it rest. But because browning process might have let some of the juices try to run out, I gave it a quick rest. Now I'm going to carve this just so you get a look at this beautiful color. Ah, look at that. Beautifully pink, perfect, medium rare, prime rib. Doesn't get any better than that, folks. Okay, now it's time to dig in.